Welcome to This is Whole Life, live from the WholeLife Church in Orlando, Florida. Every week we get to dig a little bit deeper together into the messages and being spoken here at WholeLife Church. And of course, that conversation would not be the same without your input. And if you join us on the online chat every week, you can get your questions. Who knows? They might actually make the service during the response time. Like this week, we got Freud a couple times, couple questions. It was good. Speaking of Freud, what's that? Who's that sitting across from me? It's not Melanie. It's not Ken. Well, Ken's on the other side.
Wow, I'm just going to get up and walk out right now.
But Freud Braz, who is tell us what you do and what your title is here.
So, thank you for having me. I am now a member care pastor, and I think my main...
Let's not say the.
All help is gone.
You're on that island on your own, buddy.
So,
welcome aboard.
I'm kidding. We're all here for you.
Thank you. But I'm actually, I think my main task is to help people connect with each other. And if we can help them connect with God. So I have the responsibility of small groups, social events, and Sabbath schools in general, and those areas.
But see, I feel really confident now. Being a Packers fan, I'm just going to drop this. I know you're more of a football.
Yep.
Than a true football fan. So
one would argue which one is true.
Exactly.
So, well, here in America, no. So, see how we're talking about cultures.
Which one has a ball touch the foot more often?
Exactly.
Yeah, well,
it's okay.
They should have taken it first. Well, they kind of did.
Myself.
Anyway. Oh shoot. So, how does it? Here's what I'm gonna say. Like how going way back now, Brett Favre was a legend, and we didn't know we had an Aaron Rodgers, but we felt pretty good, and that worked out really well. And then we knew we had an Aaron Rodgers. We got a couple Super Bowls between him and Brett, and now we know what we have in Love, so we're feeling good. So how does it feel to follow a legend in Jeff Sincomani?
Oh my God. A lot of responsibility.
I think it's just Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think something that helps is the fact that I was here with Jeff.
That's true.
And so we were together and working together, and he's such a lovely person, and he was always helping. So yeah, I miss him. It would be easier if he was still active. But
retirement.
I'll probably call him
every so often.
Yeah. Jeff hasn't changed his phone number yet.
Not yet.
So,
he hasn't changed. Oh, hopefully he does it, right, Jeff? I know. I know you're listening. I know you're listening. We miss him here on the podcast too,
for sure.
He was our little bow tire at the end of every episode. He just knew how to wrap everything together. Like, well,
time
I guess
to go, guys.
That's it, guys. Get out. And every week I'm like, man, Jeff would have had something really good there that we could have used. All right, this week I want to shout out to Erin, one of our online members, and she is still doing it old school with her checkbook and check register to balance her bank statement every month.
Nice job, Erin.
So, Erin, I might call on you. Max was seeming to have some serious problems this week with the calculator and the machine and everything. So if you have a moment or two, we'll hit you up for a Zoom call with Max. Speaking of online family, we had online family watching second service at 12 p.m. Eastern from Washington State, which means they were watching at 9 a.m. in their time zone. Wow. Here's looking at you, Bev. Yeah. And Joe from the UK is watching at the same 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at 5 p.m. in his time zone from the UK. Now, that's connecting across cultures, countries, continents, and time zones. Wow. So thank you, Online Family, for bringing so much love and engagement each week to our chat and just to our worship service. It makes joining online feel almost like you're right there, because in reality you are. So if you listen to the podcast but haven't worshiped with us yet, and maybe it's a lengthy drive, time zone or time zones make in-person visit problematic, please do consider joining us at 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Standard every Saturday morning and afternoon at WholeLifeChurch.live, where we get together. We check in, we check up, we pray over each other, and we just continue to make those connections deeper. So love that online family every single week. So just consider being a part of that if, need a place to go to church. And I would suggest WholeLife as my number one stop. So
Absolutely.
there you go.
We're not biased or prejudiced in any way.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm glad you pointed that out because I wouldn't want anyone to think otherwise.
I had to put the disclaimer on there.
Well, thank you. All right. Last episode 403, we were talking about socioeconomic connecting across those divides, and we got 2 emails this week. Ken, did you want to jump in on that, or did you want me to?
No, I think you had the summary of.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of summarized both. They were great emails that I read in their entirety, but I wanted to hit on both of them. Mel emailed us and said, "We build meaningful connections based on what we have in common. This can be shared experiences or interests. The challenge with tax brackets is that it amplifies how we are different. In the example you gave of connecting with a homeless person, you can offer food, which can help you feel like you're doing good, and perhaps you are in a small way. But how would you make a real connection with them? They would likely not be comfortable approaching you to strike up a friendship. You could approach them for a friendship, but it would take considerable work on your part to find common experiences and have them feel like you were truly interested in a real friendship. There would be a lot of distrust."
Yeah.
And Lois, kind of in the same vein, said, "Maybe material stuff isn't as much of a barrier as we'd like to imagine. I've had a homeless person thank me for just looking them in the face and saying hello, even though I didn't hand them anything, either food or money. All I did was wish them a good morning, comment on the weather, etc. Just common courtesy, chit-chat stuff. Nothing earth-shattering or consequential. Their follow-up comment was that most people don't even want to look at them, and that it was nice to be treated as if they were actually worthy of notice." And I really resonated with that a long time ago at a young adult service that we had called Deeper over at Forest Lake Church years ago. We adopted this homeless person. His name was Steve. Had an amazing story. One week he just found his way, kind of like on our website, if you got lost in traffic and you ended up here, we're glad that you're here. Yeah, welcome. Come aboard. And we all took an active role in trying to, befriend, disciple, and just be a basic support network. And there was a lot of what both Mel and Lois said. So I really wanted to, as someone who, you're not wrong. It's hard to have a real connection because there are trust issues. Do you have my best interest at heart? Are you doing this to make you feel good, or do you actually care about me as a person? And that was a huge, huge deal. And unfortunately we lost kind of connection. Steve moved on to another place. And so that was, I miss his laugh. He's kind of like, if anyone here at WholeLife, and Nathaniel, if you're listening, I love you, mean it. This is an all love. If you hear Nathaniel laughing from across the room or across the building, it's Nathaniel. Yep. And Steve was the same way. He had a laugh that would just make you smile and go, Steve is here. And so, but it really, both comments, thank you for the email, both Mel and Lois, because I feel like that's where we have to really get down, even if it's not a homeless person in this situation. But if I want to be friends with Freud has to know that I am interested in a friendship, not just because of, he's a pastor here. Maybe that's someone I'd like to connect with, or maybe there's something in it for me. So definitely true. And, just having them feel, Lois, the way, just looking at them and, even the small talk, a touch, I think that's a huge, huge thing.
Acknowledging each other's humanity.
Oh, there you go. See, See, I told you, that's why Ken is here every single week. That's why. No. And here's where Freud had me early in his message. No, it wasn't. This was after. I'm sorry, but this is. I put it at the beginning. Okay, see, I'm fooling myself with my order and my outline today. Actually, this is what wrapped it up to me. It just let me know that Freud is really WholeLife people. He's WholeLife podcast people. He's just good people. Good people. He said the best way to get together and get across culture, potluck, is to sit down and eat together. And Stanley said, it's hard to be angry when someone's feeding you, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And I brought the example of my baby, the Nicholas.
Yes.
And when I don't feed him, he's mad. But when he eats, he's all smiley.
Yeah.
So I think
there's a reason why when there's an international potluck, it's the best attended day or potluck of the year. Isn't it interesting that we're at we get excited about the food, but less excited about other cultural differences at times.
Yeah, I think, well, food it's hard to say no. It's hard to compare food with other things. But yeah, I think everybody's interested in other cultures, what people eat. Yeah.
I think it goes into something though so basic is like, what do you eat? Like even here in America, when people, first time we had some friends over after we moved, grew up in the Midwest for 30 years. We moved here. We have a small Bible study group. We have everybody over, and this guy's like, "What's in the bowl?" And he's like, "Smells like chili." And I'm like, "It is chili." And he's like, "No, it's not chili." I'm like, "Well, it's my mom's recipe. Pretty sure I know it's chili, but okay." He's like, "It's not chili." He's like, "Sir, what you have in that bowl is chili mac." And I'm like, "Well, what?" He's like, "Because it's got macaroni and cheese." He's like, he's like, "That's not real chili." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well," I said, "It's really not going to be real chili in a moment to you when I go and I put a layer of fresh sharp cheddar cheese grated over the top of it. Then I put a giant scoop of cottage cheese on the side for that hot, cool, and melty cheese all in one. And then when I throw a handful of Cheetos on top of it and take a fresh piece of bread and put some butter on it and dunk it all together and have a bite, it's not going to be chili anymore. This is Wisco chili."
Okay.
And so he had to go, but
I haven't had lunch. I'm hungry.
I know. I like. We should have eaten before this. Yeah. No. So even just across the United States, there are such, people will tell you, "Oh, I'm from here. This is what we do. I'm from there. That's what we do." And just a side note, real quick, March 16th, swipe up in today's show notes. If you want to experience maybe the best potluck of international cuisine. Our last potluck here was lit.
Pretty much every potluck at WholeLife is an international
right?
potluck, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
because we have people from all over the world. So
yeah.
And do you know, when you go visit a city, if you want to understand, to realize if that city is international or not, if they have a lot of options from different part of the world. If you have, for example, I remember when I was living in Geneva, they didn't have a Mexican restaurant. They only had one.
Okay.
Only one?
Close to downtown.
I have three within 3 miles.
Exactly. And so, and now they have more.
You're
But
also closer to the Mexican border, Max, than
That might have something to do with it.
But that's how you see if it's an international place. Yeah.
Thanks, Ken.
Just thought I'd let you know. You probably have fewer German bakeries on your.
Oh, there's a German meat stand down in Winter Park that if you haven't been there.
Sanford has some.
Yes, they
German,
do. Oh, Hollenbach's.
It feels like Orlando is pretty international in its food offerings. Seems like there's a lot there, but even so, you still will notice fewer of certain, and a lot of it, it comes down to geography. If you have, the closer the country is, and the more, and actually it isn't so much the closer the country is, the more immigrants that you have from, if you have Italian immigrants, you're going to have more Italian restaurants in that area because, get a taste of home. Yeah. That was, when I lived in New Zealand, that was one of the things that just blew me away, is that just some of the things that you expect food-wise to be the same just aren't. Ketchup. That's American ketchup is very, very different than, I guess it has tomatoes in common, but that's about it, maybe. And I don't even know about that. But, it's a different culinary experience, and so it can be. I remember having the chaplain at Southern Adventist University came out to do a speaking engagement in New Zealand while I was there, and he brought 6 burritos from Taco Bell with him because there was no Taco Bell to talk about. I mean, he brought those, and I thought I was in heaven when he handed those off to me. I was. It's just like that taste of home. Another thing I'd do is there was a Subway in a gas station. It was like the only Subway for miles. And while I was in New Zealand, when I would start feeling homesick, I would go to that Subway. I'd get a foot long or two and just sit outside and eat it and feel like I was back home. Wow. And it's funny how food will take you back home.
Mm-hmm. And that's odd because even back then, I mean, how long ago was it that you were?
Oh, that 15? Would have been 97-ish.
Ooh, that's a ways.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like now. Well, no.
It was like, wow.
Yeah, you gotta get,
wow. You're older than I thought.
Well, I'm older than Ken, just for the record. So that's kind of when I say wow, I'm like, wow, I'm getting old. But it wasn't like now where it's like DoorDash and people are like, hey, dry ice, we'll ship you a pizza from Detroit to wherever you are in the world. It's going to cost you, but we'll get it there. Yeah. So to actually find those, that's kind of crazy. Yeah. So Brazil, Portugal, France, and the U.S. Is that the four?
Switzerland.
And Switzerland. That's right. There was 5. I missed Switzerland.
Do you know any German? Or do you have?
If I lived in German?
No. Do you speak? No.
I can understand some words because I was living probably 2 hours from where in Switzerland they
so the part of Switzerland you were in was that
French speaking.
French speaking?
Yeah.
So how do you say this is whole life in French?
Ici c'est whole life.
Huh. That sounds good.
That sounds kind of like my grandma who speaks English, the way that she says it, a little bit. So,
well,
this is it's kind of that. It sounded a little bit like that mountain twang. Maybe there's French in my family that I was unaware of.
Today, all the way from France, Freud Braz tells us how to say this. Oh, that's like my grandma.
Ici,
c'est
whole life.
Whole life.
Okay, well.
Ici, c'est whole life.
Yeah.
It
isn't easy to say, but
no. I have a hard enough time with English. I'm not attempting much else.
Yeah.
So I thought that maybe one of the points that maybe we often forget, or maybe we just mischaracterize because we think we know, but in actuality, nobody explains it just a little bit deeper because, stats is everybody's favorite to argue over because it's like, oh, the stats can pretty much say sort of, if you twist them around enough or use the right stats, you can get them to say just about anything you want. But, you were kind of like asking the question, like, why do I have to, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to connect across cultures? What? And like U.S. has the highest number of international immigrants as a percentage of population. You said it was 13.7%.
So the percentage is 15%.
It's 15.2. Did I write it down wrong? I probably did.
But the amount of immigrants, we have over 50 million here.
Yeah.
The country that comes in the second place, it's 15 million, which is Germany.
So maybe gotcha.
So it's a lot.
It is a lot.
I'm not saying in a negative way. It's just if you at some point you are going to interact with someone that is not.
It's not even at some point anymore, I don't think. I mean, I don't know what it was like growing up in any of the countries as far as immigration. I know those are all like a lot smaller countries, but consider the country of Wisconsin, if you will, where everyone predominantly, like you mentioned, most of those countries were Catholic until, what did you get to? Was it France that was more Protestant, or was it Switzerland? Switzerland. Yeah. But like everyone growing up, like Wisconsin back in the 70s, early 80s was predominantly Catholic. It was predominantly a lot of Polish, German immigrants. And so like that's who you knew, right? Yeah. And when we moved here in 2001, it was like, wow. I mean, I'd been to a few other countries, not a ton. But to actually see all these different people from different, like every day, like you don't go to work and not see somebody who, it was just so different because in Wisconsin, everyone pretty much looked like you. And, once you were kind of north of Milwaukee and even Madison, where there's a little bit more, there was more culture there. It was closer to Chicago, and maybe some of that had something to do with it. But as soon as you were any amount north of that, it was just like everyone looked the same. And so everyone talked the same slang. Everyone understood when you just said, yep. Like that's a full sentence in Wisconsin. That means a lot of different things.
Yep.
Right, exactly. And so you come here and people start asking you questions like, wait, the first thing we got was, you from Minnesota? And I was like, no. Canada, eh? no. And they're like, oh, must be that Wisconsin. And I'm like, nobody in Wisconsin says Wisconsin. You know, bubblers, you know, all these cultural things. What did you find when you moved from just being in so many different places throughout your life? Yeah. Was it like a shock moving here to see in Orlando, or is Orlando's the only place you've been in living?
Yes, in the States. Yeah.
Okay,
but I came to the States a few times before I moved here, and I married with an American citizen that was living in the States since 2 years old. So at home, I was familiar with the culture.
Gotcha.
But I can tell you something. When I came here for the first time, I went to a mall. And at the store, I went inside of the store. It was like a Lids, those stores that sell hats and things like that. And the lady came to me and she was like, "Hi, how are you?" And I was impressed because I thought she wanted to know how I was doing. and in Europe, you don't ask people if you don't know them. You're not going to ask, "Hey, how are you doing?" It's more like, "Hi, welcome," you know. But here, people are so friendly. That was a huge shock. I was like, do I know her from somewhere? and it took me a while. And I went home and I told, hey, baby, there was this lady that talked to me asking me how I was. And I started answering her. I was like, I'm good. And how are you? How's your day going? She's really interested. So it was for me, I can tell you that was the biggest culture shock in the beginning. It was a positive, culture shock. Then I think moving from Brazil to Europe, you definitely feel that people are a little bit colder. But
really,
it's just in the first interaction, they are more reserved, and it's typical. And I hope I'm not like judging, but it's typical from countries that are a little bit cold. I'm talking about the weather,
temperature-wise. Well,
temperature-wise, yeah. So in Brazil, people are like, hi, like they talk to you, they hug you, they don't know you, but they go and they are super.
You actually have an interesting theory, don't you?
Yeah.
On
what? Okay, let us have it.
On how weather impacts culture.
I think it plays a huge role, and this was a theory that it's not my original theory. It was my teacher that I used to teach history and when I was doing my master's. And he was explaining how when people come from a cold place, they tend to be a little bit more disciplined because of winter. People that lived in winter time back in the days I'm talking about, because now I think it's a little bit different, but still, if we live in a place that you have a lot of snow, you need to have time to do stuff. For example, you need to wake up at a certain time. You need to move snow. You need to put salt. There's a routine that you need to follow.
Have to have things put away for the winter so that you have enough food to make it through.
Another thing is food.
Yeah.
What is going to grow during winter time?
Not much.
Not unless you got a greenhouse.
Yeah. So in Brazil, my mom has a little backyard, and when you go there, she has like sugarcane, mangoes, like all type of stuff, and it grows so fast. And these, huge fruits and vegetables, and it's easier.
It's year round, right?
Yeah, and you don't need to be worried about what you're gonna eat because and neighbors will share food, and it's a different dynamic.
Another part of it, right, is that if you're holed up for the winter, you kind of are a little bit more of a loner. Or I shouldn't say loner, but you're just more insular to your family because you're not able to get out and visit as much. And this sort of like Freud mentioned, this is probably pre some of the modern things that we have, but and whereas maybe in a place that's warmer, you're able to get out, mingle, go around a little bit more. So I thought it was an interesting theory. I'd never heard that theory before you brought it up, but I thought, man, that's kind of interesting.
But nobody stands out in their front yard when it's 20 below out and with their hands in their pocket, like, hey, maybe we should have my hot chocolate's already frozen. I guess I'm going. It's not like you bring out a glass of iced tea here or a lemonade where someone might go out, even if it's warm, and stand and talk.
Well, but the other thing is like, it's always been interesting to me. Like my dad grew up in western Pennsylvania. Very, very cold up there. My grandpa used to joke that there was 9 months of winter and three months of poor sledding up where my dad grew up. And my mom grew up in Virginia. And it was always interesting to me to kind of see this blend of Southern culture and Northern culture. And Northern culture tends to be very businesslike and let's get this done. Let's move. Let's get, focused, get it done. From a Southern perspective, kind of a little cold and austere, a little bit less friendly. Whereas in the South, things to move a little bit slower. They don't quite move quite as fast, and you kind of take your time a little bit more. And going to what Freud was talking about, weather, that kind of makes sense. If it's 120 degrees out, you're just not going to move that fast. You're going to slow down. Whereas if it's cold, let's snap through this. Let's get moving. Let's get inside. Let's get things done. Let's move along. And so I thought I really thought your theory was kind of interesting as I kind of was thinking about that. So I'm going to think about it a little bit more. But going to this sermon, I think that Freud said something that Randy said that there was talking about that Americans being kind of friendly, a little bit more friendly than what you were used to in Europe. What's something that you've discovered here in the States that's not as pleasing to you? That what's something culturally that you're like, I kind of miss this aspect of Europe or whatever?
So let me not talk about my experience, but let me give you an example of someone else.
Chicken.
I know.
Chicken, come on.
I know this teacher that came from Europe.
Name is not Freud.
Name is not Freud.
I know. No names. And she came and she's working for a big university. And I came here and I went to visit her. And she was telling me how she wanted to have a more deeper connection with people. And I was like, why don't you, organize things, like find friends? And, she was like, well, but when I try to hang out with them, it's like after an hour, they are like, I'm going to go home. It's very fast. And in Europe, when you go to hang out with someone, it's like 3, 4, 5 hours the whole day. And so I remember another time that I was in Geneva at the church, and there was, because close to Geneva, there's an university campus, Adventist, where Americans go to learn French. And some American, they used to go down to that church. And there was this French girl that she was a little bit frustrated because she felt like every time she was being friends with an American girl, it was a little bit superficial. They didn't invest a lot of time. They were super friendly. So she was like, oh, she wants to be friends with me. But she would only spend a little bit of time and then leave. But there's a reason why that happens. Because, for example, in Geneva, we had 5 churches, Adventist churches. And when we had events with the whole young adults of all the churches, it was probably, let's say, 100 people max. 100 people. So you don't have a lot of youth for Christians that get together. You don't have a lot of options for friendship. Here, it's like you have maybe, I don't know, how many churches do we have here in this region?
30,
40, you have a lot of options of people that you can, I can literally hang out every weekend with people my age that kind of work the same area that I work, or my wife, and couples the same age that have kids or not. So it's easier to find. And sometimes, and here in America, things like people don't have time. Time here is very precious. So we need to work. We need to go. We have this, we have that. That's kind of the huge culture shock for me.
Did Portugal have like a siesta, like a longer lunchtime? Like here in the States, you take about, theoretically you take an hour lunch.
Yeah.
In some European countries, don't they take a longer?
Yeah. The one who, Portugal, we will do the siesta. We have another name for that. But Spain, it's the one who does it
The most.
Wow.
So what is that?
There's a reason too.
That's weird.
For that.
Well, let's hear it. What's the reason?
So the reason is because during the summer, especially, it's so hot, and here in Florida it's so hot as well. But we have AC everywhere. It's not the case in Europe. You don't have AC everywhere.
Yeah.
So during the summertime, they stop working during those hours that is very hot, and they take the siesta, and then they will work until 8 p.m. for example, because it's a little bit it's a less,
kind of split your day in half, and
yeah, exactly. And they go to bed super late. They have dinner super late. They are known for that.
See, I think what you're saying though too about having more time, like where we come, like in Wisconsin, when we didn't have a lot of options either. There was like ours growing up in Green Bay. That's the biggest church in the conference. I think in the conference, for sure in Wisconsin, you'd have to travel at least 30 minutes to find a congregation a fourth of the size probably. And if you drove half hour the other direction, you'd have to go to 12 or 20 churches to get to what you had in Green Bay. So there wasn't as many people. But I also think in what we noticed when we moved here was here it is hard. People are fast. Even though it's the supposed slow down, the only thing we found was slower here is the people's work ethic was a lot slower. Yeah. It was like we came here and we're just like, wow, like an hour lunch. What is that? Mm-hmm. And like, what is this whole? But on a Saturday afternoon, if you would invite someone over after church, they'll stay with you like, oh, we had lunch, and then and someone want a snack? Yeah, let's have a snack. Oh, popcorn. Whatever. Oh, let's have pizza. You guys want to pop a movie in? And like people will stay till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they're like, all right, I guess we gotta go home. So you guys want to stay on the couch? That's the kind of. So I do think I feel like what you were describing in Geneva is kind of felt like home to me.
So another example, Sunday I went to Maitland at a farmer's market.
Oh, I saw that.
And our brother, shout out to him, Jonathan.
How was the kombucha?
Oh, kombucha was super good. He's amazing.
I gotta get some of that. It looked really good.
Yeah.
Watching him,
I'll bring some for you.
Oh, that looked good.
So I went there, and there was this couple, French. They were selling, French pastries and crepes and things like that. It was amazing. Both of them are French.
And this is at the Maitland, right on Lake Lily?
Farmers Market. Maitland, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so
now I know where to go.
I started speaking French with them, and they were, we are having an awesome time. It's hard to find people that speak French. And so we were talking, and there was a huge line behind me. And the lady kept talking, and she was not serving me. She was just talking with me and Deanna. And I looked back and I was like,
Freud's like, we're about to get.
I don't know. There's a bunch of angry Americans behind.
I don't know if you understand that. We are not in France. People will not wait here. They're going to leave.
Yeah. Well, that's the case in the French cafes, right? The service is going to be a lot slower than you would have here, right?
Except for Paris, because Paris it's fast paced and it's and a lot of French people, they don't consider Paris as a French culture.
Okay.
Really?
And it's a big debate.
Okay.
But outside of Paris,
really?
It's low.
So I liked what you brought up in the sermon about, you talked about how the Greeks and Romans would kind of take their culture with them. Mm-hmm. And whenever they would conquer another country, they would Hellenize it, that they would take that Greek culture. And even to this day, there's a lot of Greek culture in the United States. A lot of the concepts we have come from that. Mm-hmm. So Greece played a huge role culturally, even to this day. And the way that we preach actually has less to do with the way the Judaism would do teaching with a rabbi, and a lot more to do with the way that the Greeks would do debate and oratory. And so anyway, all that to say, I liked how you brought that in, because I think it is something that sometimes we take Western civilization, Western culture, and we put it on a better than category. It's like, well, and culture, I always define it as the way we do things around here. And we basically say, hey, well, the way that we do things is better. And so when we take Christianity into another culture, to another country, we say that the way that we dress, the way that this is how you now need to do it because this is the correct way. This is Christianity. You can't be a Christian if you don't do it. And we kind of sometimes get confused about what's culture and what's Christian. And we kind of confuse Western culture, some of the Greek and, those things, we get confused that that's like somehow superior to the way that other cultures do things. And it's actually pretty harmful. I remember my wife was taking Guam history at the University of Guam. She was teaching on Guam, and so that was part of her requirement to be a teacher in the public school system there was to take that class. And she was seeing the class, and I guess some military spouses were auditing the class, or I'm not sure why they were taking it, but they were in there. And Rochelle told me that at one point she wanted to crawl underneath her desk because of some of the comments that they were making that were really degrading to Guam culture. And it's like, well, basically you don't know better, so okay, that kind of thing.
Ouch.
And it was just, and for somebody who's lived in Guam culture, you're like, well, there's some really cool things that people on Guam do that we don't do here in the States that we could really learn from. I mean, their emphasis on family and community. I mean, you can't, if you're driving around the island of Guam, 30x5, you're driving around and you see a fiesta taking place. And this could be somebody's birthday party. This could be, a religious festival. It doesn't matter. You see a fiesta happening. Firstly, all fiestas happen outside. They don't happen inside a home. They always are happening outside. And if you see it, you can absolutely park your car, walk up to the fiesta, grab a plate, start eating, and just join in. Wow. It's not, oh, well, this is a party for my 7-year-old and their friends. It's, hey, you see it? Come on in. Wow. Come on in. Yeah. And they will not let you. It's considered to be rude to leave a fiesta without a plate of food.
To go?
To go. Yes. If you walk out of there without a plate of food, you're a rude guest.
Like you didn't enjoy it, or it's not good enough for you to take.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's exactly. It's basically saying your food is no good. I don't accept your hospitality. Equally rude is if you brought food to take it with you when you leave. If there's leftovers, you don't take it, you leave it. And so that's one of the hard lessons Rochelle and I learned is that you
don't bring your good glassware.
You do not take it in a dish you ever want to see again.
Oh, man.
You take it in disposables because, like I said, when you leave, you take a plate of whatever food you want with you home. So it's not just taking what I had home. Now I can take all this other food. I have a plate of food for later. But again, we kind of sometimes take and say, well, this is the right way of doing things. Well, let's talk a little bit more specifically even than that. Let's talk about right and wrong. Like one of the commandments is thou shalt not steal, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it becomes interesting when you go into other cultures because stealing is defined in the United States. We have a very different definition of personal property than some other cultures in the world do. So when Guam was when Magellan bumped into Guam, I was about to say discover, but when Magellan bumped into Guam, he named the island Isla Ladrones, which Freud, if I know my accent's probably terrible on that, Isla Ladrones.
I don't know how to say
Island
that.
of Thieves. I think that's Spanish, but Ladrones?
Isla de Ladrones.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's the Island of Thieves is what he named it. Why? Because when the natives saw his ship, they were like, what is this? And so they all row out to the ship. They come on board, and they start seeing all this stuff they want. So they start taking it, and they're putting it in their canoes, and they just take it. And so actually a really nasty incident happens where he fires on them, and it's like, it's people die. But the reason, he called it Island of Thieves, but the problem with this is this. In Guam, the native Chamorro culture was a communal culture, and what was yours is if you're not using it, then I can use it. It's not a, this is my property, this is your property. It's, hey, if I'm not needing it, then of course you can use it. It's you don't have to ask. You just walk into my hut, you take what you want. And and I will, when I need it again, I will walk into your hut and take it back if I need it. And so for them, when they walked onto those ships, they weren't stealing anything. They were just, hey, you're part of the family. Welcome. If you need something. And it's not like the Spanish didn't help themselves to a bunch of the stuff on that island anyway. So my point is, you take something, we talk about, the fiesta and how everybody's invited. We like that. But then we get down to one of the commandments, thou shalt not steal. And we say, well, no, that's wrong. This is personal property. But biblically speaking, the personal property, the way that we do it in Western culture, is not particularly biblical. Biblical in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, God talks about leaving margins in the fields when you're reaping, so that the poor can come and eat. So that and so we have this tendency to say the way that I do it's the right way to do it. The way the culture I grew up, why? Because it's comfortable. And it's keeping the commandments. Those poor Chamorros, they don't know better. They're just, they're not as advanced as we are. Yeah. Well, you tell me, what's more advanced? A society that has learned how to share to the point where if you need it, help yourself, or I don't care whether you need it, it's mine. I don't know. It's an interesting. There's pluses and minuses to both, and that's where I think, when we start talking about culture, people will get really worked up quick, because this is what I grew up with. It has to be right.
So it's very interesting, because translating the gospel, it's one of the biggest challenges. And when we talk about translating, it's not only about language. When I came to the States, when I moved here, not to visit, when I moved, I knew that I needed to learn the language. But in order for me to learn the language and to learn the codes of communication, I needed to understand people. I need to understand how they think, the expressions that they use, the meaning of the words. Because, for example, the word eventually exists in Portuguese, French, and English. But when you say, eventually,
honey, I'll fix that sink eventually.
Exactly. Well, it has, I think, double meaning, because sometimes in English it means that you will do it later.
Yeah.
You'll do it.
Yeah.
Eventually I will, do something.
Yeah.
You're telling me that later you are going to do it.
Right.
But in French and Portuguese, eventually is maybe.
Oh.
It's maybe. It
sounds more accurate to me.
It's not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen.
If it's on my honey-do list, that's eventually, yes.
But if you see eventually, so
hey, this is my get out of jail card I've been looking for.
I've just been stuck
Rochelle,
in the Portuguese.
you just didn't understand what eventually means.
That's probably
so it's maybe and probably not going to happen. So
not going to happen.
So it actually eventually can mean probably not.
It's probably
very unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Interesting.
Ooh. So
this has changed some things.
Sorry, Freud. We're just over here going.
Okay.
I'm replaying some conversations I've had with Freud.
I know that.
Hey, I'll eventually go. No.
Deanna told me, hey, eventually we'll do this. I was like, yeah, eventually. And I didn't understand what she wanted to say.
Now. You understand the English version. Yeah, of course.
So my point is, translating the gospel is very hard, because when we get the gospel, we get the values, the core of the gospel, and then it comes with all the cultural that comes with it.
Yep.
And I'll call it maybe traditions.
Yep.
But those traditions, they are not negative. And I said, one of the things that I said in the Q&A time is, and I probably didn't have time to explain, but the tradition kills religion.
Yeah.
Very often that happens. If you go to Europe, you understand. France, for example, it's a country that they have monuments to remind us how bad it was for Christianity, So if you go to south of France, some places where, they have these museums that talks about maybe a dark part of Christianity history. But
So I just want to clear up.
Yeah.
They have monuments. You're saying they have monuments that say that basically Christianity is bad.
It's that tells a story of people killing for the sake of the church.
Yeah. Okay.
So and we could talk more about it, but we don't have time. But the what I wanted to go is sometimes we want to translate we don't want to translate the gospel. We want to take it in the way it works for me in my own reality.
Yeah.
And not even talking about my country, my own reality. And I take it to another reality without translating or contextualizing.
Yeah.
And Leslie New Begin, I love reading about him, and he understood that for when Europeans were taking the gospel to other countries. And that's not only the Europeans, because I believe, and I've seen with my eyes, that we have a tendency to transformate or to make traditions part of the core of the gospel. The traditions, they are not, and let me give you an example. I talked about this missionary pastor working in Niger. And over there, he can't do communion with grape juice and bread, So he can't do it in the way we see the Jewish tradition they used to do. We can do it, but not them. Is that super important? What is important here? Is it to celebrate Easter and celebrate communion together and everything that happened in Easter and Exodus? And what is important here? Is it the tradition? Is it the physical aspect of it? Or is it the core value of what we are trying to celebrate here? And sometimes those things, we make tradition as a value, and then we get a little bit lost, and people cannot relate to it.
So what do we do for people, though? Like when you came here, what did you find maybe that was the most, maybe this isn't as weird as I thought? Or was it after you learned English and had some more, like you said, maybe you were able to put some more context to eventually in other words and in the gospel? Because I fear like, you talked about, circumcision and how, that, the Jews and the Gentiles and that I feel like those are kind of the same things we can hold tight on something that maybe we just don't understand. Also, maybe how off-putting that could be to someone who doesn't understand what we're really saying.
But if you wanna learn how to translate the gospel, or it's how to integrate a country, or you go to WholeLife. That's it.
Oh, that's
a cheater's way out there, Freud.
I think that's a gold star, though. That's
one of the things that I encourage people to do when it comes to what Freud's talking about is read books that give you background on. Some of them are called Bible background commentaries, and so what they'll do is they'll tell you when this was written, this is what it meant. This is what this phrase meant. This is what it meant to, we hear a lot in the Bible about rain, like God withholds the rain for Elijah, and we're like in our modern society, we're like, well, there must have been a drought, and this happened, that happened, and why is God being all mean about just taking away the rain from a bunch of people who needed it? Well, what we're not seeing in our context is, and it's there when you understand it, is that this is a showdown between Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, Yahweh, we believe God, the God of the universe, and the god Baal. And Baal was a fertility god, and when it rained, it was him fertilizing the earth and making things grow. And so what's happening is you've got the Israelites who have started worshiping Baal. They're basically asking Baal to send the rain, to do these things. And God's trying to make a point to them about who's in charge of the seasons, who's actually in charge of these different things. And there's a lot of nuance to it, that comes up missing because we didn't grow up in that culture and we aren't familiar with that culture. And so if you can find books that give you the cultural background, it will add a richness and a depth to your study of the Bible that will just really benefit you. You know, the same thing with a lot of the shepherd metaphors in the Bible. If you read about what a Middle Eastern shepherd did and who they were and what their responsibilities were, it will change the way that you read the 23rd Psalm. It'll change the parables that Jesus talks about. It'll actually change the way that you see King David coming from, he's the youngest son, he's out watching the sheep. This isn't because he's the favorite son. It's because he's the youngest. And this isn't like favored duty. And so,
hey, a book on the shepherd in the 23rd Psalm. I think there was one.
Yeah, I think you read one of those, didn't you?
I read one and recommended it.
Yeah, I think you did.
A while back. I did, yeah.
You know, another book that I really, that I think I've found helpful to me is, I think it's called The Blue Parakeet. And I think that's the name of it. And so I'll have to.
Why does that sound so familiar?
Probably, have I recommended it already?
Maybe, but let's double check.
Times. I probably have.
We'll put it in the show notes. Otherwise, even if we have.
But again, this book talks about how we go about understanding the Bible when it does something strange that doesn't make sense in our culture and our time, and how do we go ahead and reconcile some of the things that we see in the Bible. My point is, go look for these books. They're all over the place. I recommend IVP, letter I, V, P, has two great Bible background commentaries called the IVP New Testament Bible Background Commentary and the IVP Old Testament Bible Background Commentary. And that will it'll literally, every book, it has commentary on sections of each book and each chapter that gives you the background on what's happening there, the culture that's going on. Is this
digital by chance?
I don't know if it is or not. I have them in hard copy on my shelves, and I refer to them quite frequently. I find them just as helpful as the regular commentary, Bible commentaries, and just as fascinating because you really come up with some interesting insights. You're like, I had no idea. You know, we've talked about a number of times, like in The Prodigal God by Tim Keller, that just one of my favorite books of all time, that one of the background things is that if you're not from that culture, you don't understand that when the older brother says, haven't I done what you want all these years? The answer was no. The older son's responsibility was to go look for the younger son. That was his job. That was what he was supposed to try to reconcile the younger son, go tell the younger son, hey, dad misses you, come home. That was his responsibility. Instead, he was out working the fields, making money, trying to increase the family business instead of trying to rebuild community and relationship. And so, you know, you have these two parables that happen where somebody goes and looks for something, they find it. In this parable of the lost son, the most important thing, a human being, nobody goes and looks for them. And we think in our Western culture, it's like, why didn't the dad go look for him? But that's one of the points that Jesus is making in the parable is that was the older son's responsibility. Yeah. He was supposed to go do it, and he didn't. And when he said, all these years haven't I done what you wanted me to, the answer was no, you haven't been. You absolutely have not been.
And Ken, you're talking about understanding the Bible context and the message. And I would add to that if you want, for example, if you work with someone from another culture, or if you're married with someone from another culture, it is important to understand their history and do some research about the habits, about where do they come from. I remember when I moved here, I was at Costco with my wife, and I saw this book about American history for teenagers. And I grabbed that book, and I started reading it. And a lot of things made sense for me.
Made more sense,
And I was like, oh, this is very helpful. It's helpful to understand the context.
Yep.
And I'll add in our human interactions, understanding why people, because like yesterday, I was with this couple, and they were telling me that they are Brazilians, and they were telling me that the basketball coach of the kid was a little bit upset with him because he was always saying what, because in Portuguese it's normal to say what, like explain what's happening, like I don't hear you, but the coach expected a little bit more of, sir, what do you mean? A little bit more maybe polite.
Oh, I get,
And the kid, he just moved to the States, and he didn't understand that. So you can have those little culture shocks just because you don't understand how to communicate, and one thing has another meaning
expectations.
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago, is we're treating everybody the same is bad. Because if you look at somebody and you don't take into account the culture they come from and where they're and why you will not understand why they're doing the things that they're doing, and you'll chalk it up to bad behavior, as opposed to a sincere person who's just doing what is normal for them in their culture. And I think that's one of the things that I really want. And that I heard Freud say, and I just want to double down on in this, is that at WholeLife, we have a lot of different cultures in this church, a lot. And sometimes we look at somebody and we're easily able to say, well, this person is different from me. They're a different color. They come from, they're different. I can see that. But there's a lot of times where there are people that look identical to you, but they came from a different culture. They physically look the same, but they are they think completely differently than you do about something. And I think it's important here at WholeLife. The part that I want to double down on is, don't assume that because somebody's doing something that annoys you or you think is wrong or that you think is rude, that they're trying to do it on purpose, or that it's take into account that person may have grown up in a different culture than you did. And it's possible to grow up in different religious cultures as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so take the time to try to understand as opposed to judge.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this. Tell me about
asking questions is so important. If I would say, if I have something that I can tell you, like practical, that you can do to understand other cultures, ask questions, respectful questions, but don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
That's super helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just assume good intent. There are some cultures that are very abrupt. And if I'm going to be honest with you, there are some cultures that I've run into that have been so abrupt with me. I'm like, you are the rudest. Yeah. It is so rude. Yeah. And I have a hard time getting past that. And I have to remind myself that's just the way it is in that culture. And it's easy for me to say, well, your culture is wrong. That's rude. Or I can say, well, that's just the way you do it. And I need to go ahead and adjust my expectation.
I have an example.
What was it again?
What?
Presumption.
Assume good intent.
Assume good intent. We had a little shake up on the chat this week, and I'm like, we set ground rules for even staff meeting every week, and I'm like, maybe we need to put those in the chat, just like, hey, just as a friendly reminder. Assume good intent, and give ourselves that, and just having you say that again, because I thought about it this week, and I'm like, how can we just help facilitate? And if it's no different, it's even more difficult than a chat because you're not looking face to face. It's hard to ask questions, and I thought, well, maybe that'll be a helpful thing. I'm glad we brought that back.
I think the other part is to be patient. Yeah. There are some times where somebody misunderstands you, and like, oh, you're a thief because you took this, and so clearly you're a thief. And it's like, well, no, but I mean, you came to my island. I didn't come to you. Come on now.
Yeah.
And yet somehow I think that's what God's grace is all about. It's about giving people grace. It's certainly one of our values here at WholeLife. It's a written stated value that we give grace. And that means that we really genuinely believe that everybody is wanting to do the right thing, however misguided they may be, right, is what we would sometimes say. But and it really helps me. I think that probably some of the things that have hurt me the most is when people have come and assumed that for some reason I would want somebody to do something that God didn't want them to do, or that I'm somehow wanting people to be lost. And I think it's been one of the things that I've had that accusation sent, well, you're just leading these kids, to hell with the kind of music or whatever. And I can understand that that's your opinion, that this isn't right. But for you to say that I am purposefully doing that, like that's my intent, that's hurtful. That's hurtful because, I have dedicated my life to telling people the good news about Jesus. That is what I've dedicated my life to do. And by the way, you don't have to be a pastor to have dedicated your life to doing that. You can be in a lot of different professions and dedicated your life to helping people know Jesus and experience the gospel and God's grace. But I wish that we can disagree. I mean, it's fine to say, I think that kind of music leads people away from Jesus. What's wrong to say is you're doing it on purpose. You're trying to do that. I struggle with that. There's people that I disagree with pretty fundamentally on some theological things, but I really try to keep an open mind that they're just doing the best they can with what they believe, that they're not doing it for any other reason than they believe it's what's right.
Yeah.
I have an example of that. When I moved, I'm sorry, just one last one. When I finished my bachelor's after 3 years living in France. So after 3 years in France, your French is not in high level. You can speak, but you still make mistakes. It's probably the level of English that I have now. After 12 years there, of course, it was way better. And but I started preaching in some churches because they would invite us to preach. And so I remember going to a church, and there was this lady that she didn't know me. And I was preaching, and at the end of the sermon, and I mentioned this on the Q&A as well, she came to me and she had a list of mistakes that I did.
Grammatical mistakes.
Ouch.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt so bad. I was like, oh, that's direct. I mean, and I went back to that church a few times, and I became a youth pastor over there. She was my best tool for my sermons because she was passionate about her language. She was generations of people in her family speaking in French and being teachers, and so she wanted to help me.
Yeah.
And she felt bad for me being in front of a lot of people not speaking in the right way. And probably a lot of people felt like that, but nobody told me.
Nobody said anything.
You know, but she came to me, and then we still have a good relationship because for me, it was out of my culture, and it was intense, and it was too much. But for her and for that culture, it's not. They tell you things, they are straight.
Just straightforward.
So
there's the good intent.
Yeah,
right.
That's what he was.
Just assume good intent. That's awesome. Well, look, we've got as we wind down here, we have just a couple of comments and a question. Anonymous says, "I like how the theologian Richard." And his last name was spelled Mouw. I'm not sure if there was, looked like it could have been maybe a typo on the keyboard. But he says there's no one human individual or group who can fully bear or manifest all that is involved in the image of God, so that there is a sense in which that image is collectively possessed. By looking at different individuals and groups, we get glimpses of different aspects of the full image of God. I thought that was really, really good, and maybe something we could think about, maybe look that up. And just remember that, because just knowing that it takes all of us to really get the full image of God. And then SM said, our church staff is diverse, and they are setting an excellent example of how we can all work together. I enjoyed hearing from our Brazilian pastor. Paul understood the Gentiles and Jews due to his background, and God chose him to spread the gospel to the Gentiles. God includes everyone. What can we do to be sure we are including others more than we have in the past?
Well, one thing I can tell you.
Go for it.
The experience of living in 5 countries has definitely, when I came to the States, I came to a culture where we have a lot more openness to immigrants and international, cultures. At least that's what I can say for me. And I'm not saying this just for you guys to be happy with me. It's just here, it's people have the intention of making everybody be seen. And that's how I feel, especially at WholeLife. I cannot talk for other churches, but
Sure.
here in the States, we talk about these issues, and we talk about like this comments, amazing.
Yeah.
In other countries, it's not the same thing. In my country, Brazil, it's not the same thing because we don't have as many immigrants.
Yeah.
And sometimes I called people gringo when they were coming to my country when I was a kid, but that's negative. Like,
is it? Yeah.
I think it is because you're separating them and saying, hey, this gringo. And you think that they are,
I kind of took it with a badge of honor with someone I know, but that's probably because I knew them. He's like,
now you know what they're really saying about you.
Yeah.
They think,
but he's like,
he doesn't understand things.
He's like, you can speak gringo. I can't speak good English. So he's like, we have a symbiotic.
But
that's good.
I think people should know that in the States, I know there are issues, there are injustice everywhere. But here, I feel like I'm lucky.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So,
cool. All right, one final. Piper asked, our political cultures are very angry and divisive right now. That's an understatement. What role should we as individual Christians play in healing these cultures?
Be instruments of God's peace.
Ooh, there you go. Maybe still being seen and having the... I keep getting it wrong. It's the intent.
Assume good intent.
Assume good intent.
It's funny. I wish that sometimes, I don't know if I do, but I do kind of a little bit wish that sometimes that those of you who are listening could see behind the curtain here at WholeLife with our staff and with some of the conversations that we'll have amongst ourselves. We have a lot of very passionate people who have a lot of very different viewpoints on things, and the conversations will get, I would say, heated at times, but not heated in a I hate you or you're an awful person type of way. We get heated about the topic and we get passionate about it. And then we don't, and we don't, I don't think that we change each other's minds all the time, but we have the conversation back and forth. And sometimes the point is not to change the other person's mind, but just to understand the other person's mind. And so, Randy and I have gone a couple rounds on some different political issues and things like that. And before and after this, and I've like, you did quit recording, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's respectful, it's passionate, and we're friends at the end of the day.
Well, we had someone last week text while they were listening to the episode, and they texted Melanie to say, "You guys good?
You guys still friends?
You guys still friends? Like, you're talking to each other?" And she's, and
the funny thing to me was like that, my friend, that's the mild salsa.
Yeah. That's not the spicy version.
Yeah.
But I appreciate, though, again, I think that's what you're talking about in the culture here at WholeLife, that if somebody hears something that to them, and then maybe in their culture or in at least their tribe and their circle of influence, like, whoa, I do want to check on my friends because it sounds like they're a little upset at each other, and I would rather jump in and say, wow, are you guys okay? Like, anything I can do, or acknowledge it, be seen, like you said. I think that's important, and I want
to let them know we're all good, right?
We're all good.
I mean, Melanie's didn't come back this week.
I know.
But,
that's what I was thinking.
I didn't think
She's not here. I don't know.
And she's not coming back next week. I don't know.
But she'll be back after that.
She'll be back after that. Yeah.
Melanie's on a special assignment right now.
Yeah, and she's probably not even taking time to listen to the podcast to see how
she
we
better
did.
not be.
I know, right? Like, don't.
She better not be.
Don't.
If you're listening to this, Melanie, you have listened for
off.
an hour longer than you should have.
That's right. Turn it off. It's over.
Melanie. Yeah.
All right. Next week, we are going to continue this tradition of guest speakers, aren't we?
We are.
And do you know how to pronounce the last name? Because I don't remember which version is correct anymore.
I don't have it in front of me, but
Schleuter.
Schleuter.
Right?
Justin Schleuter is going to be our guest. Thank you for remembering that. And
thanks, Fred.
Justin is a Stephen Ministers ministry pastor. I believe he's coming to us from St. Louis. I think I might not be 100% on that, so don't quote me. But we have a very active Stephen Ministers ministry here at this church that is just phenomenal. They're fantastic. If you're not familiar with them, hey, check out our website, talk to one of our pastoral staff. We'd be happy to tell you. But basically, this is a ministry where lay people go through some intensive training. It's a lot of training.
It's a lot.
But what it does is it really prepares them to walk alongside people who are going through crisis, who have that just need somebody to walk alongside them. These are not licensed counselors. That's not what they do. If you have something that requires counseling, we're gonna get you a certified counselor. But this is somebody who's gone through more training than the average person and just knows how to walk through somebody who's going through a dark time in their life
support.
and just needs that support. And so Justin's going to come in and he's going to actually be talking to us about connecting across hurt. And maybe one of the more difficult things to do when you have experienced deep hurt in your life, how do you connect? Should you connect? And so, looking forward to hearing what Justin has to say on that topic. It's also just going to be a special emphasis on Stephen Ministers this Sabbath, and then the Saturday after that, which is 16, March 16. Is that right? I'm trying to. So no, I'm sorry. March 9.
Yeah,
March 9. We have a special guest musician, Javen Lavick.
I almost said Justin Lavick.
So we're really you really honestly do not. You never want to miss a worship service at WholeLife, but you really don't want to miss a worship service in this coming month. There's just a lot of really great things, because on the 16th, we're having a all-church potluck, which, I mean...
It's going to be inside of the worship center. That's the first one.
We actually... So, yeah, we're doing... After second service over, we're going to move tables into the worship center. We'll have... eating in there. They'll be eating in 105, 305, and 101. So there's going to be a lot of different 108, not 101, right? Anyway, so there's going to be just a lot of different places to eat inside, and hopefully, if the weather will cooperate, and we'll do the serving outside. And it was kind of cool. You've actually arranged for a kind of a little program too during this.
Yes.
That's kind of neat. So
they are organizing to have some music,
and
live music. I think
awesome.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
it's going to be great.
And
Rolly and his team are doing great.
And
job.
then on top of that, the week after that,
oh man. He's letting all the cats out of the bag. I know.
I don't remember.
Well, this, we have to give our podcast people a little extra, because they're giving a a extra.
They are.
You're going to get to hear from a sermon from our newest staff member.
Oh, that's right. That's that week. Yeah, there you go.
We have a new staff member coming on board.
Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
Because if Freud moved,
that person,
that means someone's got to take Freud's place.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But we have a new pastor that will be coming on board very soon.
All right,
and that person will be speaking on that. What is that? March 23?
20. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
WholeLife.church/events for everything that is upcoming. And I'll just tell you that as the purveyor and keeper of said events calendar, this week by Friday, you're going to see about 15 or 20 more events that have not been. They're starting to come. We kind of had a lull. And then we got all this information dumped on us quick, and all the dates. And it's like, okay, we got to have graphics. We got to get this stuff made. So Max and I have been working in the background to get all that set. And so you'll start seeing those pop up over the course of the week. So
pay attention. Always
know that when they're there, all you have to do is hit add to the calendar, because we're never going to put anything there as much as we can hopefully ever have to change it. The date, once we know the date is locked in, then we're good. Then we put it on the calendar, and that way it can come in your calendar. You can do it. You can share it with everyone right from the URL. So WholeLife.church/events and all the other Stephen Ministers, the potluck, those all have individuals. Those will be in the show notes today, just for ease of use for you. Just do all those things.
Awesome.
Freud, thank you for your message and for hanging out this week.
Great job, Freud.
Great job. All right, guys.
We're going to go ahead and have Freud preach more often. I think there was even a sermon topic he was trying to dump off on me, but
we'll have to find out what that is.
I'm going to have him preach on it.
Yeah, hey guys,
outside of preaching.
I have a lot to do too, Freud. It's okay.
Outside of preaching, I have all the groups, and it's okay. It's okay.
Wow, I feel like he thinks that all I do is preach.
Wow.
Wow. So you're saying.
So I'm coming from my perspective.
So here we go. Here we're about to.
We're gonna have this.
We'll assume good intent.
We will not go back to second service and then hear what that is and then hold them to it, what the subject matter is. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening as always, and have a great week.